Welcome, everyone, to Hello, Ernest at the Kitchen Table, connecting writers and readers. I am Jan Pratt, the author of several children's picture books and also the author of a series of yoga lesson plans for kids.
And I am Gaga Gabarty. I'm a co-author with Judy Lee Butler. Together, we write the Phoebe Cornell Mystery Series. Join us for every episode as we connect readers to your next great read. Well, for all of our listeners out there, today is a big day. We have with us Carla Seyler, a published author, and Carla has agreed to come on. We appreciate her time because I tell you what, it's only a half an hour podcast, but we really appreciate authors taking the time out of their diligent writing exercises most mornings. And of course, I'm being hypothetical here, but want to welcome Carla and thank you for agreeing to come and talk with us at the kitchen table.
Thank you so much. I'm delighted to be here.
Well, we are happy.
Say,
yeah, go
Seyler.
ahead. Seyler, yes. What
yeah.
did I say?
Sailor?
Frank or something?
For years it was, I was called Sailor Girl, but it's actually Seyler.
So all that teasing back in high school was for naught because they couldn't pronounce it correctly. Or your married name, huh? All right. Yeah. Good. Thank you for that. Well, let's get started. I think, our listeners always like to start at like a 10,000 foot level. How do you get here? What inspired you, or what was the turning point to take you into writing? Tell us about that.
Well, I have always wanted to write, and this started when I was about 6 and started with the funny papers. That's what we used to call them. And there was a comic strip called Brenda Starr, and she was this glamorous reporter. She was very adventurous. She had these amazing adventures that she would pursue to get the story. And so I decided I wanted to be a reporter. And my intended major was journalism. And my parents were absolutely horrified. And they said, they were very concerned about in New Orleans, it's not always been the safest city in the world. And so they were concerned about an entry-level reporter having to go into the crime beat. And so they just thought, oh no, and did everything they could to discourage me. And I cratered. And so ended up writing for a living, but that was narrative reports in my work as a vocational rehab counselor. So I didn't get into writing actual fiction, which I'd always wanted to do until I retired.
Okay. All right. And are you in New Orleans today?
I'm in New Orleans today. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Good.
I kind of go back and forth between New Orleans and Buena Vista.
Oh, all right.
I've just pronounced it.
Well, or Buena, just to be safe, just call it Buena, and you're neither right nor wrong. Good. Well, I like that I have met someone who used to read the funnies, because I read religiously the funnies every Sunday morning, and they were in color, which was quite the event also. Hey, with all of your experience, and of course, as you say, you're in a very interesting, lively city of New Orleans. Do you have any themes that you like to write about, or was there anything particular that popped into your brain when you said you retired and started writing?
It's interesting. Probably not. It's funny because I always wanted to write, and the thing that for me, I had to have a plot or a story before I could start writing. And so for me, with my first book, I hope my first book, not the last, it was, I read an article in the New York Times, and it was by a restaurateur called Dan Barber. And he also now has a seed company where he developed seeds. And he talked about the lack of food diversity, global diversity in our food supply, and the vulnerability of our food. And I felt like my head was going to explode because I thought, I didn't know about this. And so that's when I said, okay, I can write about this. And so that started this deep dive into all this research about food and what it means, and how little, how vulnerable it is.
Yeah, good. I love hearing you say that because I definitely feel the same way and do whatever I can to support the growers in our life.
Yes, yes. And so if your listeners plan to go to a farmer's market, because that's where you support the actual person that's growing things, and they're more than likely going to have something unusual that's not been processed 100 million times, and it's designed to be harvested at a particular time.
Right. Yeah, right. I grew up on whatever fruits and vegetables were in season, not what was available at the supermarket, because there were spaces where there was nothing because it wasn't in season back in the
Yes.
day. And I'm
Yes.
old.
Well, I don't know if you've ever read the Barbara Kingsolver book. I think it was, I'm going to forget the title, but it was all about her family trying to eat local for a whole year and how challenging that was.
Yes. Yeah.
Just trying
Yeah.
to do that.
And disappointing that I can't get red pepper in the middle of winter. What is this?
Yeah.
That's always my example. So, well, what are the literary influences that you've kind of tuned into with your research? Do you have any, besides Kingsolver, anyone else that you've
Sure.
kind of?
Well, recently, it's been Percival Everett, who I love it's very crisp dialogue. It's very fast paced. What he did, and I thought it was so original, he reimagined Huckleberry Finn, and has told the story now from the point of view of Jim, the slave. And so the book is called James, and it was like, oh my goodness, it's just it was so interesting. But other people that I've enjoyed have been Ann Patchett, Ken Follett. Both of those, just like Kingsolver, will take some sort of bit of history and then add some, a narrative, imagined narrative to it. And so I've liked that a lot. But again, lots of dialogue and good scene setting. Someone else I like a great deal is Nora Roberts, who has written over 200, I think, romance novels, which is amazing. But I think what she does is keep the suspense and also develops characters that I can relate to. And so I admire all of those authors. And I think the thing about dialogue has been just something I love and try to emulate.
Okay, all right. So that is the key thing for your takeaway on what you're reading, is that the importance of dialogue. Is that what I hear you say?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
And I tend to get impatient with books that don't have much. So, which is, probably speaks more about my lack of self-discipline. But
Well, what are your writing habits? You're talking about self-discipline, but what are your habits? Do you have I write religiously for 34 minutes every morning at 5, or can you capitalize on that for me?
I'd like to say that. Unfortunately, I am not that disciplined. I'm a binge writer, and so I'll get stuck. And so at that point, that's when I tried to connect with what Central Colorado Writers, the wonderful critique group.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. And then also my brother, who was my very first critique group, and we started it during the pandemic. We both had always wanted to write. And so what we did, we would write, swap by email, and then have a phone call about and discuss what we had written. And so there was some
Perfect.
accountability.
Yeah.
And so
yeah.
I do need accountability to make myself write. And then if I get stuck, I do tend to like I'll talk to my husband, I'll talk to family members, I'll get on a streetcar here in New Orleans, I'll take a hike in BV. It's just get outside myself.
Right, right. Okay. So that's how you stay motivated, is get outside or be in a group with other people.
Yes. I attended a workshop with the Tennessee Williams Festival group here in New Orleans by Zoom not too long ago. And one of the authors talked about getting space in their head. And I thought, well, that is exactly what I try to do, and so I can have a zillion excuses and say, oh, after I finish this, then I'll have space in my head. Well, that doesn't work. At some point you have to say, okay, this is it, and just take the time and just sit with the uncertainty, sit with the paper, sit with the computer, and just start writing. And even though it may seem like garbage, it's something that I can go back to and say, okay, there's something there, and I can pull that out.
Sure, sure. Yeah, and sometimes it is garbage. I was talking with someone last week on a podcast, and this person said he went so far as to write an entire book, and at the end of it was like, no way can I do this, and threw it out. It was like, well, that's a bit extreme.
Yes,
But
yes,
that sometimes it comes down to that. You
yeah,
really have to. Is that what you wanted to say? And
yeah.
maybe that's right. That space in your head is something that could really help, I think. Yeah.
Well,
All right. Well, okay. So that space in your head, going for a walk or a hike or riding a streetcar, how does that help with character development? What are you doing on that? What do you try to achieve?
with I'm sure other writers approach it differently, but I have to start with the storyline, and then how am I going to make the story happen with the characters, and then the characters come alive for me, and then they start talking in my head. Because with my first book, A Place Unmade, I had this idea that I was going to include a lot of my family history and background,
Oh,
and tried to do that. And where we were talking about throwing things out, I had a great deal about my grandmother and uh, my Sicilian background and all this that just didn't make it into the book, and
oh,
shouldn't have, though, because that wasn't the story. So I have to start with the story, and um, have a place I want to go, and then go from there. And the characters then tend to become active. And like for A Place Unmade, there was one in particular, Stephen Angus, who he just kind of just popped into things and decided he
oh,
was there, which was really fun.
yeah,
So
yeah. Oh, it sounds great. Yeah. Interesting how these things happen. And when you're open to it, that's when new things, new characters can suddenly appear, and why not run with it?
yes,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, very fun. Yeah, good. All right. So now you've got pretty much a finished product. What about editing, and how does editing come into it? I was sorry to hear your family really didn't make the cut, and so you had to get rid of it.
Yeah.
But what about this editing thing that you mentioned?
That I first of all, I didn't know what I was doing. I still don't know what I'm doing. But
Okay.
um, and so I spent 2 years writing this book, and then felt legitimate enough that I could join a critique group and join Central Colorado Writers, and then started getting feedback and started saying, I don't know what I'm doing. But in the meanwhile, I had sent my book off, the draft, off to about 20 different agents, and accidentally one small publisher. And the publisher, the agents all turned me down flat. And the publisher, this very tiny publisher out of New York, said, we'll publish it. And I thought, well, aren't we going to edit and things like that? And they
Yeah.
were like, no, we'll just do basically a copy edit, for
Oh,
air, And I said, And so at that point, I backed up and started contacting other people in the writing field that, using contacts, and got the recommendation to get a development editor. And this is different. This is a content editor.
okay.
And I can't say enough. When you think your book is ready, that's when it's time to get a development editor. And it does cost money. It did cost some money, but it was so worth it, because they're the people that, more than just 3,000 words or 40 pages, they're looking at the whole book and they're saying, okay, here's a hole in the plot. Well, how did this character end up here? And so it was tremendously helpful. And I can't say enough about
Yeah.
getting a development editor, particularly
Okay.
when you're new, like I am.
Right, right. But you also mentioned, of course, thank you for the plugs to CC Writers, which is Central Colorado Writers. We appreciate that.
Yes.
Uh, did you find this copy editor and also line editors and all the rest of them through this organization, or do you have a publisher now that does it in-house? How does that work?
Okay. I have a small publisher, Black Rose Writing, which is wonderful. They've been terrific, but they do not have a development editor or a content editor in-house. And so I could have asked Central Colorado Writers if I had known enough to even ask the question, but I knew someone who knew someone who suggested someone, and that's how that started. And it was a very interesting process. Central Colorado was there. I actually had two development editors. I had one that made some recommendations that were very helpful, and then some that I did not. I initially went with and presented that at Central Colorado, and there were several people that went, I don't know what you're doing here. And so it was very good feedback. And so then went to beta readers, and then beta readers are like gold.
Okay.
They're these people that are willing to read your book because one day maybe you'll read theirs, and they read the whole thing. And again, they then come back with suggestions. And I had about 5 beta readers after, again, the second time I thought it was done. And
the second.
yeah, and they were
very
great.
good.
Yeah, so it's like I spent 2 years writing it and a year of editing with probably 5 rewrites. And so I'm sure that's not everyone, but that was me. And so
I think it's quite the process. So I don't think this
sure
is
was.
unusual, yeah, what you're talking about here.
Yeah.
But I love your comment about beta readers are gold. Very nice. Yeah.
They're just amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And do you have them read for grammar or just content? What is the smart approach here?
Beta readers, you just give them the book. And that was very interesting because I had very different beta readers. I had one person who was a former editor of more journalism kind of thing. And so she was the person that was kind of the looking for grammar and things like that. I had, because my book is about food, I had an agricultural scientist who read it and was a little frustrated with me. And there were several changes after his comments. And then there were 3 others who read it more for content. And 2 of them were from Central Colorado writers who were just wonderful. Pam Torrens and Kristen Homer, who were
Oh,
terrific.
yes. All right.
And then the other one was my sister-in-law, which is so nice.
You can always tap your family. Yes.
Yes, you can. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You mentioned your brother. You didn't use him to be a beta reader?
Well, he had seen so much of it that I think he was too close to it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
So he would have been prejudiced.
I don't know that he could have.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think it was better to get someone outside, a different perspective.
Right. Right. Yeah. I've used beta readers, and they're good friends, and they are very nice people, and they're very nice.
Yes.
So, and I appreciate every one of them.
Yes.
But that doesn't sell books. All right, great. Well, we're talking here about you getting started and the process it took. What's your takeaway from that? Do you have one piece of advice for those of us out here trying to figure out how to do this writing thing? What would be that piece of advice?
Yes. And I got this advice recently, and I tried to take it to heart. It's ask yourself, what do you want your books to accomplish? Like, where do you want to go with this writing gig? Do you want to be a bestseller? In that case, maybe you need to hire a publicist. Do you want to write for the joy of it and just write?
Interesting.
Do you want to maybe be well known in your region or whatever? And so it's asking yourself what you want. I think regardless of what you want, you do have to accept you're going to have to do social media. This has been, you may see my arm is twisted into a pretzel because that's not something that comes naturally or easily to me, but it's been very helpful. And I'm learning how to do Instagram. I've certainly used my personal Facebook and LinkedIn accounts.
You
And
bet.
I've developed a web page, and it is something that I have to do. So, but I think first, ask yourself what you want.
Yeah.
Where do you want to do? Where do you want your book to be
Great.
in the
Yeah.
future?
Yeah. Yeah. And I love to quote Stephen Covey. Begin with the end in mind. And that is what you are talking about. You want to be a bestseller, then you're going to have to go after a publicist and everything else you discussed. So thank you for that. Well, what are your immediate plans? What's in the works now? What's in the hopper?
Okay, well, I'm writing a book that's called, well, it's tentatively called Chance Encounters. It's about a woman in her 40s called Coco Benoit. Naturally, she's living in Louisiana. She is working for an oil field supplier and discovers a smuggling ring. And so at her place of employment. And so then runs into pirates in the Gulf of Mexico, very smooth talking Cajuns, and a very too clever for words boyfriend named Ira. So that's what I'm working on right now.
Great, great, thank you. And what about down the road? Are you going to continue with some of these characters on this book, or in 5 years, what do you think it'll look like?
Yeah, that's a good question. I hope to have certainly finished another couple of books. Actually, one of the characters, Coco, is the mother of Amy, who is in this current book, but isn't anything, isn't related at all to the book. But that's kind of the connection. I don't know. I'm just kind of seeing where things take me. So,
Sure. All right. Good. Well, we can certainly go with that one. I tell you what, we have a few minutes. Would you care to read a little bit to us? A favorite passage and the published book or the one you're working on, whatever is in your focus, I guess, on the radar screen.
Sure. I'd love to read a little bit from A Place Unmade. And this is a scene where A Place Unmade is about, as we talked about, food vulnerabilities, and some of the protagonists in the book are these graduate students. And so this is a scene where the graduate students are talking to each other. Back to our class topic, I guess because I work at a park, the idea of collecting seeds doesn't seem strange to me. We swap seeds and plants with other gardens routinely. And I should have started out by saying this is Valentina who's talking. She works at the park. They're a resource you can share without losing what you have. What amazes me is the idea that you can patent a plant. I know, Kai said, you can graft it or modify it and then own the rights to it. I started reading ahead, and the protections for the patent are unbelievable. If my patented genetically modified corn pollen blows into your field and commingles with your plant pollen, you can't sell your corn. Kai, that's ridiculous, Leo said. Tell me about it. Genetically modified seeds can be copyrighted. There was a farmer in Canada, Percy Schmeister, who saved his canola seeds year after year and developed a custom strain that he sold locally. Monsanto sued poor Percy, successfully, I might add, after their seeds invaded his farmland and had sex with his canola plants. Those hussies, teased Valentina. That sounds pretty risque for a corn plant. I know it sounds strange, but Big Ed has been pushing out the independent farmer for years. They've gone after the more lucrative crops, so there's less and less diversity. Then they compound the problem by getting patents on plants and seeds they've modified. Fertilizers too. It's bizarre.
Yeah. Nice ending. It's bizarre. Welcome to our world, eh?
Yeah.
Thank you. That's great. Hey, where can we pick up a copy of your book?
Okay. Black Rose Writing, and you can find their website link on my website, which is carlaseyler.net. It's also available on Amazon, and it can be pre-ordered. It'll be released, or the launch date is May 30th, which, depending on when this is published, it may already be out, but certainly on Amazon.
Okay, all right, that's great. And once again, the name of the book you have out now is?
Yes, it's A Place Unmade. And that's actually from a poem by Wendell Berry, who is one of the first writers who talked about this issue, about the vulnerability of our crops.
Yeah, yeah,
and our
good.
farmers.
Yes, yeah, we're all connected. Thank you so much. That was great. And once again, I appreciate your time. Wonderful talk. I really enjoyed it. Thanks for coming to our kitchen table. Hopefully, it works for you, and we sell some more of your books. They're great, a great read. I can personally say I've sampled the first one and I get it. All right, so for our listeners today, thank you very much for joining us. I hope that you've gotten to know your favorite author a little bit better. And also, we hope that you'll take a look at the book she has out and the one that's coming the end of May. And appreciate all of your time and your support. Thank you so much, and goodbye for now from the kitchen table.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this informal conversation with today's author.
Join us next time as we connect writers and readers around the kitchen table.